Hello, Professor Sanabria. I am recording my final video in Washington, D.C., and I can't think of a better place to talk about public policy than the seat of U.S. federal policy making. You can see the Washington Monument there behind me. Before I respond to the first question, I'd like to note that while we refer to the stages of the policy process, the lessons from this semester have shown that this process is not exactly neat and tidy in real life. In practice, these stages are all mixed up and feed back on each other and inform each other in ways that are often more like strands of pasta on a plate of spaghetti than distinct and easily discernible steps. One of our readings refers to this as a degree of complexity that prompts metaphors of garbage cans, primeval policy soups, and organized anarchies. Having said that, the point was also made by Dye that policy models, like the process or stages models, are useful in helping us to wrap our heads around concepts under study. Therefore, we go ahead and begin the first step in the policy process model as our valiant public administrator deals with agenda setting. During the agenda setting stage, the risks public administrators face include ignoring, overlooking, or missing important voices and issues as they decide what will be decided. If working in a pluralist system, Chapter 2 from Hill quotes Robert Dahl, who feels that, actors whose preferences prevail in conflicts over key political issues are those who exercise power in a political system, meaning weaker voices will be lost. However, earlier in the same chapter, Hill discusses an advantage of pluralism in agenda setting, which is that even the least powerful are able to make their voices heard at some stage in the decision-making process, which can be as easy as calling one's legislators. And this is something I understand as I answer the phone calls for my job, working for a state representative. We can also see examples of amplified voices through advocacy organizations, many of which started from grassroots movements, such as March for Our Lives and Moms Demand Action. Both of these organizations formed in the aftermath of horrific school shootings. Whether they are successful or not varies, but they are loud and they are making themselves heard. One policymaker at least is listening, and President Joe Biden, according to the White House website, has created the Office of Gun Violence Prevention in response. So, next page. The wise public administrator would do well to take an example from President Biden's playbook and listen to as many voices as is reasonably possible during every stage of the policy process. Congress felt that was a good idea too, and requires U.S. federal agencies to take public comments, usually for a period of 60 days, as part of the rulemaking process. This process is part of policy implementation, and at the federal level follows the regulations set out both by Congress and executive orders. reginfo.gov states that sometimes Congress requires agencies to issue a regulation, sometimes Congress grants agencies the discretion to do so. This means that, end quote, this means that discretion can be built in by lawmakers that can purposely give wide authority to federal agencies to make the rules necessary to implement the laws in question. The Supreme Court, however, could put the brakes on this agency rulemaking authority in the combined cases of Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo and Relentless Inc. versus Department of Commerce, which could overturn the Chevron doctrine that defers to federal agency experts in court cases involving rulemaking. This is something public administrators at the federal level will have to watch carefully, as it is a huge challenge to their discretion as experts in their fields and will have deep implications at every stage of the policy process. There's a lot going on out here today. Other challenges faced during the policy process can include policy coordination with other organizations charged with the same mission, collective action problems such as those proposed by public choice theorists. And give it just a moment to pass by, and the organization's administrative capacity, which may be inadequate to fulfill their mandate. This is especially true for social service organizations, which are often overburdened, understaffed, and underfunded. Some of the steps a public administrator can take are already mentioned, such as setting a public comment period for federal agencies when they engage in rulemaking. This opens the process to anyone who wants to be heard and also increases transparency and accountability. Establishing lines of communication with other agencies working on similar issues would be a good strategy to address policy coordination issues. Clarity of mission is also important, and a reading from chapter 2 by Thomas Dye has some advice here. He states that the government itself, quote, government itself arises from a social contract among individuals who agree for their mutual benefit to obey laws and support the government in exchange for protection of their own lives, liberties, and property, end quote. Continuing to pull from public choice theory, Dye also notes that government, quote, must remedy certain market failures, end quote, by providing public goods and dealing with negative externalities. As a final reflection on our last 2 assigned chapters, it was an interesting contrast between Lindblom's 1959 paper about muddling through, which talked about rational choice theory and incrementalism, and it was like those were the only 2 viable choices for making public policy when he was writing, and the more recent paper about policy diffusion and policy transfer by Marsh and Sharman. My takeaway from Marsh and Sharman is that another viable option for developing public policy is to look to other government entities who have already implemented the policy in question or somehow found a way to successfully address an issue. As I was reading about these concepts, which discussed international level diffusion and transfer, it brought to mind how Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Care Act, developed out of legislation implemented at the state level that was then taken to the federal level. It was therefore satisfying to read Note 1, which says the diffusion literature initially focused on the spread of policies among the 50 states of the United States. So, aha! As another thought on rational choice theory, Lindblom states how impossible it is to follow all the steps in this decision-making process because there's just too much information and it's beyond human capacity to factor in everything. This is something that could change with the advent of AI technology, so it will be interesting to see what happens in this space. In conclusion, the wise public administrator can choose among the many models discussed in class as they make public policy decisions and improve their effectiveness, ranging from rational choice to game theory to incrementalism, to looking to other governments to see what they are doing and engaging in policy diffusion and transfer by borrowing the policies that work. Knowing the mission and clarity in what government does will only further the administrator's confidence in their work. And to end, thank you for the class. It was an informative semester, and I will endeavor to put everything you've taught us, to all the students and I, to good use. Thank you.